everybody to today's webinar about organization and making finances easier for law practices. So it's just going to be a discussion today, and our two panelists, Flavia is a lawyer, legal consultant, and the COO of Legalboards with over 16 years experience in civil law. She specializes in the areas of consumer protection, digital law, and privacy and data protection for international clients. And Jordan is from LawPay. And so she is a legal content and compliance manager. She's a practicing attorney in Texas and also is the legal content and compliance manager at LawPay. She has a BA from University of Texas, a law degree from University of Arkansas School of Law, and prior to LawPay, Jordan worked with High Asset Family Law Firm in Houston, Texas. And just before we get started, we'll do a little bit of housekeeping. So if there's any questions, just forward them into the emails that you see there. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to Jordan and Flavia.
Okay, very cool. Well, thank y'all so much for coming. I think I'm going to start us off here talking about best practices for invoicing and a little bit about what I had to do. Go back, please. There we go. And a little bit about what I had to do prior at the family law firm that I was at is I realized very quickly that my pay was tied to my receivables and that I wasn't going to get a bonus that month unless I was actually collecting on those accounts. So for instance, I could bill and break my back trying to do 250 hours for that month, but it didn't mean anything unless I was actually collecting on it. So I got very adept very quickly about getting money from my clients. So just some best practices, tips and tricks, and I'm sure Flavia has some stuff to add here with this because we've all been there trying to get money from our clients. But first of all, rip off the Band-Aid. No client and no attorney ever wants to talk about payments. But you don't work for free at the end of the day. I don't go to a mechanic, pick up my car, drive off with it and say, hey, mechanic, I'll think about paying you at a later date. You know, that doesn't happen, but I think for attorneys especially, there's just so much emotion wrapped up in things, or you're just so invested in the case that you almost feel kind of bad sometimes asking for payment. But at the end of the day, you're offering a service. This isn't charity, and this isn't, you know, your pro bono work at the end of the day. So that's one of the biggest lessons that I had to learn as a baby attorney, was really being comfortable and, excusing the family law pun, but really like divorcing myself from that aspect of emotions and the client needing to pay me. And then also too, the biggest thing that I would say that a lot of attorneys fail to do, that's like easy money at this point, is following up on unpaid invoices. So if I was sending an invoice out around the 4th of the month, you know, because psychologically I want my invoice to be one of the first things that people see once they get paid. So if I know that money hit their account on the 1st and it took a couple days to clear for their paycheck, I want my invoice to be one of the first things that they see, you know, right around the 4th day of every month. But what a lot of attorneys fail to do is follow up on those unpaid invoices. So about a week after I send them out, I'll get a list and see who still hasn't paid their invoice. And I personally will spend about 15 minutes emailing every client that hasn't paid me. And it's very quick. Put time on your calendar to do it. And the amount of clients that immediately email back to me and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't see, you know, the invoice from the billing department. I've paid it online. Let me know if you need anything, because I always have a signature, or I have a link to my LawPay account basically below my signature block. So they can always click on it, pay it immediately, and that's an extra, you know, $5,000 to $7,000 that I got simply just by following up with clients about a week after the invoices go out. So that to me is a big deal that people don't understand or don't necessarily follow through with, I would say.
And follow, Jordan, sorry to interrupt you, but do you need to do this follow-up at the same day of the month? Because I try to organize to do my invoice at the same day regularly of the month. I'm a solo lawyer now, so I have to try to organize myself. And the follow-up, do exactly at the same day with the list of the clients, so I can check and waste less time doing this. What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it's critical that I put it on my calendar, because otherwise there's always a mediation that happens. There's always a last minute hearing or something that you can't help, or somebody's setting up a client meeting and things like that. at least I know if it's on my calendar, it will actually get done at a higher percentage if I, didn't have it on there at all. But yeah, just like consistency is key, right? And once you set that habit, it's so much easier to start doing it month after month.
And do you do only one follow-up? I used to do two because sometimes the client doesn't answer. Do you do only one?
Yeah, no, typically email is the first kind of line of defense for me. And then if I give them a couple days and if they still haven't paid, that's when I start calling. And that's the worst thing. I hate calling, but it's just one of those things where, it has to happen. You need to do it. It can't just be your billing department, because at the end of the day, I want the client to feel a little bit chastised. Like, hi, I'm your attorney. I'm taking time out of your case to call you about paying me. So I think there's a little bit of like a guilt trip factor for the clients on that one.
I would like to do a statistic because I think that I hate to call too. I hate callings, but I think sometimes, and especially for billing, it's better to do this follow-up, not for every client. You don't have to call every bill that you have to do, but.
Right. Yep. And it just is what it is. And I'll just get a printout of everybody that still hasn't paid or that has ignored my email, because at that point, then you have to start considering, do I need to withdraw from this case? Because I don't know how you did it on your bills or on your invoices, but typically when I send mine out, it's pay upon receipt. So the money is due right now. So they don't have like this 30-day, period to pay. It's, hey, you just received my invoice. This payment is due immediately, because that way I'm not working on their case anymore if they're not paying me. So I never want to get
to learn with you. No, depends of the client, but I give some days to do the payment.
Right. Oh yeah, there's always like that wiggle room and buffer room, but I know that some firms give, 30 days to pay, kind of like a typical receipt that you would receive from just any other type of service provider. The problem is though, they're already in the hole. That's why they've received this invoice from you. And now they have 30 days to pay it. So then theoretically I could be working on this case for 30 days, get more in the hole, and then they could just walk on that bill later.
And it's more difficult to do the follow-up too.
Right.
Because I have to put in your calendar only after, I don't know, 45 days, something like that. Yeah.
Right. At that point, just cut them loose. Like if they're not paying you within, a week, basically, of them receiving that, at that point, I don't need them as a client. And I had to learn that the hard way, right? Because, a $3,000 deficit can quickly, especially with what I did, $3,000 can become, a $15,000 deficit within a matter of weeks, basically.
Yes.
So it just depends on the case and what's happening with it. But yeah, so not playing that game anymore, clients, not doing it. And we've all been there, but yes. And I would say too, just one last thing to kind of mention on here is really using your options to your advantage. So if you're taking credit cards or if you're taking ACH payments already, utilizing that to your advantage. So for instance, putting that link below your signature block is invaluable to me. So I just had a link, I customized it, it says pay now, and it's below my signature block. So every single email that I send out has that in it. So I never have a client have to ever question me about, oh, how do I pay you? Because I give you any option. You can pay me cash, check, credit card, firstborn child, everything. I take it all, and I never want it to be a question from the client of, oh, how do I pay you? So that's a big thing too. And also offering payment plans, especially during the pandemic, that's been pretty prevalent for me as far as, oh, this client's not going to be able to pay this full, $3,000 bill, but they've requested a payment plan. And I'll take a payment plan all day long, because especially for family law attorneys, we're in this unique kind of area where I can see what the entire estate looks like, and I can see the liquidity in the estate. And so when the client is coming to me and saying, hey, look, I actually don't have the money to pay you yet, this is all wrapped up, or I'm waiting for XYZ to come in, completely fine, because I can look at the estate and say, actually, yeah, there's zero chance that I'm going to get paid from this estate right now. All the money's locked up. So then at that point, I'll say, hey, let's just start doing payment plans. We'll put it on a credit card, and then we'll figure out afterwards, when some more, funds get cleared, what we can do.
Yeah, especially during the pandemic, I had to offer installments payments, because some clients, exactly what you said, I know that it would be impossible to have the payment right now. But yeah, I think it's a good tip too. And I'm excited. I started using the QR code with
Oh yeah.
LawPay, and I'm excited. I think it's a good option too to do the payments. It's easy, it's fast. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel very like futuristic and fancy when a client uses it. Yeah, and how I kind of envision that. So for those who don't know, QR codes essentially are those little codes that are on your phone that somebody can just take their camera and scan, and it will immediately go to your payment page or your invoice, kind of however you have it set up. But I kind of envision this moment where I'm at the courthouse and I'm about to have this hearing, and I notice that the client's actually really low on funds, and then my dream is that I can say to him, oh, look, actually, you can pay me right now. Here's the link. You just have to scan it with your phone. That would my absolute dream. So when the courthouses start opening back up fully, I feel like this is going to happen. I feel it in my bones.
My dream is one click payment. Click one time and it's done.
Yes, we're getting there.
Yeah. Okay. And here we have the common issues with practice and organizations. Yeah.
Yeah. It also looks very familiar.
The first one, I think, billable hours. We work a lot with non-billable hours, right? And to organize and what do you have to do that's billable, that's not billable. I don't know. I think that I read a research that only 30% of our day are billable hours.
Yeah, there was another statistic that came out, or they basically, I've been told that if you are billing and collecting on 4 hours a day, then that's basically the average, which is crazy to me because then I think about, okay, well, I'm usually working 10 to 12-hour days. What am I doing wrong? And am I not capturing my time? That was always one of my biggest problems was capturing my time because you're just, you're blowing and going. So you're working on 10 different matters at any given time and you're answering phones, you're answering emails, you're running off to the courthouse and things like that. So it got it was very hard for me, especially as a baby law attorney and just working a lot, trying to keep track of my hours.
Yeah. And I think that the second point here is standardized process. I'm trying to do, but it's difficult too. But we can use technology can help us to do that, and I think that we have to do. It's a must do. I don't know what you think. We have to have the process of our daily tasks, this kind of thing.
Well, and I kind of wish I would have had this kind of from the get-go when it comes to legal technology, and especially when it comes to, legal boards and things like that. I think about, oh, this would have made my life so much easier had I just had it before instead of kind of trying to weigh my way through it. And then the firm that I was with was big, but they were always in flux about what they were going to use. So there was never like a standardized process for things. And it was always putting out a million fires and trying to make sure that we weren't getting sued,
Yeah, once I had in my former office one consulting service, one coach that helped us to try to figure out what we do every day. It was interesting. We think that we already know. I say this every time when I am doing a demo session with legal boards. I have to start telling this to lawyers. Do you know your process? Do you know your workflow? Do you have your workflows drafting somewhere? Because otherwise we can't help you. You have to know what you do every day. Where are you losing time? Where you have to, I don't know, maybe have someone else in your team too.
Right. Like we had to do that too. It's kind of like an internal audit, right, of your company, where we then had to figure out like, why are we wasting so much time on this, or why are the paralegals having to put in for so much overtime? And it really came down to they're spending way too much time on PNC phone calls and setting that up and getting them in the door because that's non-billable time. And I would rather have them working on billable cases and not having to go into, overtime territory if they don't have to. So that was a big kind of pain point for us that we had to figure out, but we would never have known that unless we had done this kind of internal audit with ourselves.
Yeah, and the third point is to focus on the delivery of the service, because we have to be different, right? We have a lot of competition and we have to focus and to be clear, to be fast. So we have to have billable hours, to know privilege our process, to focus on the delivery of the services. I think that this is the most important, to focus on the delivery, right? Because if you want to have the billings, you have to do the delivery in the right way. And I think that the clients, because of our society, it's getting more fast, more technology involved, we have to do this exactly the same way.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And I think clients, like you said, expect it at this point, and they expect, like, when they're coming into a firm and if they're paying you this amount of money, I think they expect it to be this slick process. And
Yeah.
they expect to be treated with respect too. So I think gone are the days of, the overwhelmed attorney sitting on his desk that's just like surrounded by mountains of papers. That's kind of gone at this point. People expect when they come into your office that things are going to run well, both on the front end, so me just facing them, customer facing, and then also on the back end. I think clients would be kind of shocked to know if you didn't have some sort of process in place and didn't have some sort of technology in place that, pertain to their case.
Sure.
Like, you're telling me that you just can't go and pull my pleading up right now, that you don't have it saved in your system somewhere. Like, what kind of office are you running? Why does it take 20 minutes to get this? So it just really does impact psychologically how the client views your firm.
Yeah. I think we can move to the next slide. Okay.
Oh yeah, these are fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I think how people do billing is evolving, and how people structure their fee agreements is evolving. And so I'm seeing it more and more, especially with family law, where they're kind of doing these hybrid models where they're saying, okay, if what you're telling me is true, client, and this is actually going to be an uncontested divorce, which, ha ha ha, if it ever is. But if you're telling me that and all you need me to do is draft something, okay, then let's do that. It'll be $1,000, XYZ, we can do it. However, then they have a caveat in their fee agreement that says, however, in the event that this becomes contested, we're going to require a retainer of X amount of money, and it will switch to an hourly billing model at that point. So it's fascinating to me, and it seems to be working. I've seen it crop up more and more.
Yeah, in my practice, I have to be flexible. So I work with flat fees. I work with capped fee. I have worked with retainer. But what I really like, I like to work with subscription. Oh, yeah. I think we can move to the next slide to talk a little bit about subscription. Okay. Well, I think that I use the subscription. We can use subscription model for a lot of different legal services, but I use as outside in-house counsel. And for me, works very well. I think that the tip here to use the subscription model is to have very clear what is included in your package, in your subscription, right? Yes.
Yeah, and, like sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please go ahead.
Like, I have a friend that does it where she treats it, and I've never heard it termed like this, but it makes sense. She treats it, her subscription model, she says that she's like a PCP of attorneys. And so when you go into your PCP, she can do a lot of the regular run-of-the-mill stuff, but in the event that you would need a specialist, like, oh, your case is getting a little complicated, then she refers you out to somebody in her network that essentially does only that. So it's really, really cool how she structures it. And then essentially she just makes herself available, and I think she charges these people about $25 to $30 a month just to have her available. And then in her fee agreement, how she structured it too, it's like, hey, if you ever need me to review a contract, here's how much it is per page. Things like that makes it very, very clear, like Flavia was saying, when it comes to what exactly is a part of that bundle. But it's fascinating, super cool, works very well for her.
Yeah, and with me, I started to using subscription because one client asked me and suggested some years ago, and can be interesting. And yeah, and I have been noticing that some online platforms are being launched to have exactly what your friend do. To have some lawyers, you pay a subscription. If you are a startup, a small business, you can pay subscription to have some legal service with different lawyers. If you need a copyright lawyer, you can use this one. And the thing is, I think that they only work in Canada, but you can choose the lawyer according with the profile. So it's very cool because you can go to the website and you can describe what you need, what you want. You have one free call, and then you can pay the subscription. I think that subscription for small business, for startups, it's a good model too. But I don't think that is for every client, and some clients you have to convince, right?
Yeah, and family law clients, I feel, would abuse this model way too much. So I think that's absolutely, it's impossible. I know that there are services now kind of tailoring themselves towards that. It's just anybody who does family law, you know, that's going to watch this is just going to laugh about it because it's so impossible to do it and to do it well to where the clients aren't abusing that process. But that being said, this absolutely works for a lot of people.
Yeah, and another thing that I think it's important to talk about the subscription model to work well for the lawyer. The lawyer has to do automations, has to have standardized process. Otherwise, I think it won't work.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think you can go to the next. We can go to the next slide. Oh, here's the QR codes.
I know they're back, but this is really, I mean, this is kind of when you're asking yourself, why am I not getting paid on time every time, and what can I do to kind of increase revenue, and what can I do to increase collections with my firm, especially, which was always, you know, our problem as a high asset family law attorney, because for some reason, I don't know why, no one wants to ever pay their divorce attorney. So strange, so weird, crazy. Even if they loved us, still they just never want to pay it. But there are certain things that you can do to help yourself. So offering options like QR codes and offering that option to clients, offering them, you know, these different types of alternative fee arrangements that we were just talking about, offering them training at the end of the day, and offer it like basically to also really just letting the client know from the get-go, especially when you're in your initial client consultation, how invoicing actually works. So what I tell clients generally is, hey, you're going to be receiving an invoice once a month. It's usually going to be around the 4th of the month, or, you know, that first week of the month, and here's what to expect, and here's how it's going to give you a breakdown of your bill, and here's how your retainer plays into that. Because a lot of times this is the first, you know, this is the first time that clients are usually going to have to deal with attorneys, is when they come to me for their divorce. So they've never dealt with attorneys before. They understand kind of what a retainer is, but they really don't fully understand. And when you even say flat fee, sometimes they still don't quite understand what's all included in that. So the key is to be very, very clear at your initial client consultation. But I think generally clients want to pay you, especially if you're doing a good job, and it really will frustrate them if they don't understand how you're billing or if you never receive a bill. So a lot of attorneys I know, especially, which, you know, use legal technology to your advantage, but there are so many firms across the country that are months behind on sending out an invoice, meaning that in family law especially, that's crazy to me. So you had their case in October and they're not receiving a bill until January, which is crazy because I want to get paid. And so it's a lot of, you really need to use technology to your advantage, and those types of firms are the ones that will benefit the most from automation.
Yeah, and I think that it's especially challenging to explain the retainer agreement. Yeah. And it's very important to be transparent and use a language that the client can understand. I think you can avoid future problems doing this in the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we actually talk about some bad practices on the next slide if we want to go to that.
Yeah, let's go to the next slide.
Oh yeah, so yeah, like I was just talking about, erratic invoicing. So it needs to be consistent, and everybody in your office needs to be on the same page. And the problem is a lot of times there's one or two attorneys that don't get their pre-bills in or don't get their hours in and things like that. Well, there need to be consequences for those attorneys or for those staff members. So just be cognizant of that, because this is what's going to impact your bottom line the most, is getting out those invoices consistently at the same time every month.
Yeah, and only one more thing. I think that not sending reports, when I say reports, I mean information about the services, the matters. It's a mistake that will directly affect the billing. So send information to your client about the matter, the consultants, whatever you do.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And then trouble tracking time and inputting hours, which was always my
Yeah.
I was terrible at it. And again, I wish I would have had better legal technology to my advantage at that point. You know, it was just terrible, terrible, terrible. And I hated it. I hated tracking it. I hated inputting it, especially. The whole process to me was such a big pain point that it caused a lot of strife between me and the managing partner.
I think that we will talk this in the next slides, but I track everything. I track my time for everything. Even if I'm not doing a billable hour job, I track my time. I like to know how many hours I have been working in that stuff.
And I do feel like I'm much better about it. And that kind of was a lot of trial and error before we got some legal tech in. It was really, yeah, that was on me. And I understand that that was my problem, and I get it, and I'm getting better about it. But it really was such a big pain point for me. But yeah, we'll talk about it. But then next up on here, oh yeah, not following up on unpaid invoices, I've already discussed. Just do it, set it on your calendar, email it. It will take 15 minutes of your life. Just do it. And then also, my biggest thing on here too, and a lot of firms complain about the same thing, is taking forever to return pre-bills. So a lot of that now has become automated, where they'll do it online, which is super cool. Ours was still printed out, so we'd have a thick stack of pre-bills for us. And then how our firm did it was, this needs to be returned. So the turnaround time is 24 hours, no ifs, ands, or buts. So that's it. So you need to be very consistent about the time limit that you set on that, because if you put it on an attorney's desk and don't give them a time limit, because attorneys thrive on deadlines, but if you don't give them a time limit, they're not going to return it to you, or they're going to return it to you in a week after you've been pestering them every 2 days. So it should be, here's the pre-bills, here's a red sheet attached to it so that they know it's important and they can see the color of it, and then it has to be returned within 24 hours, or there are ramifications for it. Like maybe the managing partner pays them a special visit, which no one wants. So
yeah, I agree. So I think we can move to the next slide. I think we are right talking about this.
Oh yeah, we got ahead of ourselves here, but really, yeah, we've already talked about being super clear when it comes to your fee agreements. Always, 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 always. So I never want the client, my big thing is I never want the client to have to Google something surrounding the advice that I gave them or the fee agreement. So it should be very clear to them, and they should have a full understanding when they leave of what's contained within it and how to kind of understand or interpret it. So I never want them Googling or having to ask their friends about it. I've given them all of the information. Truly, just do it.
And I love this 30-part payer addendum.
Oh yeah, that's my big thing. If anybody on this webinar wants it, email me, jturk@lawpay.com, and I will send it to you. So this is a big thing that would happen in family law, is mom and dad want to pay for son's legal fees. So son is divorcing and they're like, we love you, son. We're paying for these fees for you. The problem is, and a lot of times for family law, crazy, but there's some familial discord in these cases. And sometimes mom and dad have a falling out with son, and they then contact the firm and say, hey, we no longer want to pay for his fees. Please refund the remainder of the retainer to us immediately. So the problem with that is, in some states and jurisdictions, the money, once the parents paid for those legal fees for the son, that retainer, that fee technically belongs to the son. They consider that it was a gift to the son. But other states and jurisdictions will say, nope, mom and dad pay for it. They can basically do whatever they want with that money that hasn't been earned yet by the firm. So then it goes to them. And so you can avoid all of this strife if you just have the parents execute a third-party payor addendum. So it's kind of, I just attach it to the fee agreements, and it will be something that mom or dad signs that essentially says, yep, we're assuming this, we're paying for it, and here's where the remainder of the retainer will go if anything is left over.
It's a guarantee. Yeah, cool. I want this template.
Yes, I will send it. It's been wonderful, and I highly recommend everybody to use it because it just prevents a ton of headaches down the road.
And when we say evergreen retainers, do you think that monthly retainers, what do you think it would be a great evergreen retainer to send to the client?
Yeah, so how I fashion this and what I found most effective is I would put a little prompt in our fee agreement about evergreen retainers, and it basically would say, hey client, you agree to pay the firm X amount as a retainer. The retainer is not the cost of the case. And then it would say, hey, for as far as an evergreen retainer goes, if your original retainer ever dips below 40% of the original amount, so if it was a $5,000 retainer, if it ever dips below 40% of that $5,000, you're required to automatically replenish it up to the original amount. So that way, the goal would be that you're always working against funds and trust as opposed to having to chase down invoices at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I'd have clients initial it, beautiful, done. So basically, every once in a while when it would dip below, they'd get a notification and say, hey, per the fee agreement, and the evergreen retainer, this should be replenished. We already have your credit card number on file. Hey, do we have your authorization to charge the card? So super easy, and 9 times out of 10 clients say, yes, I get it, thank you.
Yeah, it's clear, yeah. Okay. Next slide, I think. Yeah, here only I think only to show one invoice, but we talked a lot about the.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific tip for the invoice?
Other than the timing of when you send it out, to me, that's the most important, is to just be consistent on the timing.
Yeah, I think we can move to the next slide. Well, this famous question, do lawyers need another tech tool?
Well, I think that's, yeah, I mean, sorry, Flavia, you can go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we're always, the problem with being an attorney, one of the many, I know, but you're always getting kind of bombarded with these salespeople, and they're always saying, well, you need XYZ. So I could do a million demos in a day for legal technology, but nobody's telling me if this is actually going to help me and help me to the point where it will benefit me and bring in more revenue or more clients for my firm. Because that's what it comes down to, right? Am I going to get more time back in my day? Am I going to make more money, and am I going to get more clients? Or are you just trying to sell me on a dream here? You know, so it's a little overwhelming, and sometimes it's really hard to know, you know, what's actually going to help me or not, and are these people going to be truthful to me?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think that the answer for this question it's our famous question for everything. Depends.
Yeah.
I think that before searching for another tech tool, you have to understand your practice, what we talked about, your daily administrative tasks, talk with the team. And I like when I do demo sessions for Legalboards, I like when I have a lawyer that's starting telling me what he or she needs, because I can tell, okay, Legalboards is not for you, it won't work for you. Legalboards doesn't do what you think it can do. And yeah, I think that can be honest. And I always start asking if you are used about workflow tools, if you know what it's a workflow. It seems stupid, but it's not. If you know about agile methodologies, this kind of thing. But I don't think that the same tool is for every lawyer.
Right.
You have to understand what you do and what works for you. I use, I think, 3 or 4. I don't like more, and I like to use integrated because I hate to open a lot of.
Me too. I don't like toggling. Well, the whole thing with LawPay is, you know, we're an online payment solution, right? So if I have somebody that's telling me that they get paid in cash or check or wire transfer, and that they get paid 100% of the time, always on time, no issues, they have very good clients, then there's zero reason, and their clients aren't requesting, to use credit cards, there's zero reason then for you to use LawPay. Like, we're here to help you and get you more money. And if your clientele doesn't need that, nobody's requesting it, and you're completely fine with how your receivables are, then yeah, I'm not going to sell this to you. That's the point.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that we can sell more, being honest.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I think we can move to the next slide. Well.
Oh yeah, so we kind of addressed this a little bit already, but yeah, it just is overwhelming sometimes. And especially when I left my old firm and came to work for LawPay, I still do my own solo practice on the side. So it was a lot of trial and error, and it was a lot of calling around and figuring out what I needed and what I wanted. And so it was interesting because I kind of got a firsthand view of what when you're hanging your own shingle, how that actually looks. And it's a little bit overwhelming. And then you're trying to put together all the monthly fees, and you're like, okay, well, what do I need? Like, triaging wise, what are the most important things that I need to be able to run this firm and to offer to my clients? So that's kind of where I started with it. Crazy.
And I think one point that we have here that we don't like to do that, but sometimes we have to, it's change the revenue model to valuable billing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work, but I think you have to do this. I was, and going back to a little bit about tech tools. I think that Bloomberg, there was a Bloomberg research survey that they were talking about tech tools, and the number one difficulty was the lack of time to do the training, to know, to learn about the tech tool. So if you want to use a new tech tool and you don't have time to do a training, to train your team, or to learn about it, it's not for you too.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's important because sometimes lawyers, they want to have all the tools to do it easier, faster, but it won't work. And I think it's very important. We talked about time management, track your time, and monitor cash flow and capital. I think it's important too, even for solo lawyers.
Right, and that should be on a daily basis, which I don't understand how you don't. Like, every time I pull up my management software, I want to see where I am right now, and I want to see that on a dashboard, and I want to be able to view that every day. And I think that was part of the problem with my prior firm, was they only did it at the end of the month, and then it was a mad dash. Whereas if I'm viewing this every day, I can kind of triage and figure out what's going on, or maybe I need an evergreen retainer on this one account, or maybe I need to call this other client and figure out where their payment is, or maybe I'm waiting for a settlement to hit, and that's why we're still, in the red at this point for this case. So I want to be able to see that at any given time. And it blows my mind that if I own the firm, if I don't know where it is at any given time, financially speaking, like, I want to know.
Yeah, and I think that we can solve the lack of time to train, to know about a new technology, tracking our time, because it will be nice to find that we are wasting time with things that doesn't matter, that we don't have to do. Yeah.
Yes.
I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah, talking about performance here, the best KPIs and how to track. You have to first thing, you have to know what do you need to measure, right? Mm-hmm. What data do you already have? What are your targets?
Right.
I think that the number of billable hour, the number of non-billable hours.
That was honestly the biggest thing for me, was to track the non-billable, because that's where you really see where you can automate. Right, at the end of the day, where it's like, why am I spending so much time on this? I charge $250 an hour. I would much rather be billing that to somebody rather than spending time on administrative tasks.
And how to track. I like to use, I like to have a visual organization to know. I think for me works well. I like automations. I track time for everything, as I already said. I like to know the monthly expenses too for each client. What else?
Oh yeah, that was a big thing too, where I remember for expense wise, that would be a big thing that I would look at per client, because then we'd figure out like, oh, why is the client being charged $300 for copies at this point? For this case, this doesn't make any sense. And that's also where you can figure out problems. So it's important to be able to track that on a regular basis to see when something seems off, because at that point we figured out that there was something wrong with our system that tracked copies and that tracked printouts for hearings and things like that.
Yeah. So to summarize everything we talked about, here's some organization tips. The first one, when I say clear your mind using legal project management tools, we have a lot of things. We can use notebooks, we can use to-do lists, this kind of thing. But I think that tech tools, especially legal project management tools, help us. We have everything organized that we can access everywhere we are, especially during the pandemic that we had to move a lot. And for me, it works very well. Clear my mind. So I know I won't lose anything. I won't lose a deadline that I have, a task that I have to do. But of course, you can do this in a notebook, but I think it's important to organize. Accountability, right? Always, 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 especially to invoice and billing.
Really, yeah, and that's a big thing too. And attorneys don't want to be involved, and I get that, but also this is their money and this is the firm's money. You need to force them to do it.
Yeah, automations, it's the hot, how can I say this? This is the fashion that everybody's talking about.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to automate administrative tasks. As a solo lawyer, for me, it's critical, because otherwise I will do administrative tasks all day long.
Yeah.
Tracking time, always, even for subscription, flat fee, always track your time. You need to know how much time you spent on a matter, one agreement, and you will have the data to review and to improve, to change, to have another tool, this kind of thing. I like checklists. I am a checklist lover, so I have checklists to invoice, to a new matter. For me, it works very, very well. And onboarding process for new team members. I think that can be useful for medium, big law firms. I think it's important too.
Agreed, yeah. And you're going to grow, and the whole theory behind this is that your firm's going to grow, you're going to eventually hire new people, and before you know it, you don't want to be the one having to sit down and train every single new employee, because then that defeats the purpose of growing the firm to get you more time and more money, you know, at the end of the day.
And include everything, because even if you decide to have one administrative assistant and you have to explain how to invoice your clients, if you have everything organized, I think you will improve your practice.
Agreed.
I think we can go to the next slide.
Oh yeah, super fun. So actually we're offering some really cool stuff here. So LawPay, we are offering a kind of a new and improved account credit. So if you go and sign up with LawPay by October 29th, we're going to give you actually $100 account credit.
Yeah, and as you already know, you can subscribe for LawPay with Legalboards. We are offering with LawPay 30% off for 6 months too.
Dream team.
Yeah.
Well, thank y'all so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun, and I think that there's a lot of cool things that are going to be coming down the pipe for the legal industry and legal technology. So it's super cool to be here and kind of see what's happening on the forefront.
Thank you, Jordan. I learned a lot. It's for me, especially because I am solo, it's very good to talk with another lawyer, to share our difficulties. Thank you very much.